Good morning. My name is Mr. Crawford. You may have me you may be in my class here at Lamar for U.S. history. Otherwise, you may have one of the other U.S. history teachers. If you're seeing this, you probably were absent at some point when this was being gone over in class. So we're going to do a quick run through of how America became a world power, which is kind of the third unit of the year. And right after this will be World War One. So we're kind of talking about the late 1800s and early 1900s there and everything. This is not meant to be the only time you see this information. It's really meant more to be an introduction more than anything else. So if you have any questions about this after this is over, which I'm sure you probably will, feel free to ask myself or your actual teacher. Also, you may have some questions that go along with the unit to complete. If you're doing that, I recommend having this open in one window and the questions open in the other window is probably be on a Google sheet or a Google Drive, a Google Doc there and everything. Have it open in both windows and kind of do this as you go along. Don't try to watch the whole thing and then answer the questions from memory. You probably won't remember everything. Plus, it'll be boring that way too. Anyway, America becomes a world power, and the concept of imperialism is the idea of becoming a world power. So this unit's also sometimes called imperialism. This kind of starts with a book by a general called Alfred Thayer Mahan, and this is one of those things I need you to know a fact about him, and it's this that he wrote a book. And the name of the book was, it doesn't show the name of the book there, but he wrote a book. And in that book, it's called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And it talks about this idea of a powerful Navy and how important that was. Remember that at the late 1800s, there were no airplanes. So at that time, it's all about who had the biggest Navy there. Part of this unit is the idea of annexing Hawaii. And the reason they wanted to do that is for sugar and pineapple production. You might recall that sugar was a luxury product that was expensive back then. It kind of started with missionaries converting Hawaiians to Christianity, but sugar and pineapple became a big deal. So we annexed Hawaii, and you'll recognize that name Dole from the brand of pineapple, and he was actually instrumental in us getting Hawaii. So that's him right there, and that is just unbelievable, majestic beard and mustache combination there and everything. You can actually visit the Dole pineapple plantation in Hawaii. I went to that one time when I visited there. It's really interesting. Part of the idea of increasing to other countries involves getting a relationship with some countries that we didn't previously have a relationship with, such as China. And we established the open door policy because basically we were the only country not trading with China at this time. So other countries were, but we weren't, and it secures U.S. trade in China. And it protects our businesses and investments there. We actually go to war during this time with Spain, of all people. And this is one you may have never heard of. You may have heard about it in passing, just not know much about it. It wasn't a big war. It was pretty brief, and we kicked their butts pretty good. The reason we go to war with Spain is because they are in part because they control Cuba, which is close to us. And you might remember that for later on in the year, we're going to talk about why it was important that Cuba was so close to it, but it's not going to involve Spain anymore in the 1960s. Concept of yellow journalism is the idea of publishing newspapers that published stories about things that were going on. I'm trying to move my face there out of the way. There we go. And everything, and exaggerating the content of their newspapers. And that's how everybody got their news back then, is through newspapers, and trying to get people riled up about it. Well, there was a boat that got blown up, or it exploded. It probably was an accident, but it was blamed on the Spanish. And so that led us to go to war with Spain. It's called the USS Maine. Let's see if it talks about that here. May not, but there it is. There it is right there. So that sinking of that ship there was probably an accident. But then this newspaper came out that blamed the Spanish for the whole thing, and people just bought off on whatever they read at that time. Everybody got their news through newspapers back then. There's the USS Maine right there. All the journalists blame the Spanish. The events of the war, this is not really an important battle. It's not even that important of a hill. It's Theodore Roosevelt, though. It's kind of his first time to reach national prominence. This is before he became president, of course, and he helps take over this hill, and the newspapers are following him every step of the way. It's not a really strategic battle in terms of its importance. Why it is important, though, is because it got people familiar with who Theodore Roosevelt was, kind of made him a war hero at the time. And then a few years later, he'll become president. And this shows the United States with its wings spread all the way from Europe over here, including the United States, and then over to China. So it talks about our influence, and we took over a bunch of islands in the Pacific as well. So, bird just flew by. Okay. Anyway, if you're not aware of this, I'm recording this during the time of the coronavirus. So anyway, there's things are a little different right now. So hopefully we don't have this going on ever again there and everything. But some of the places we took over included the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, which used to be spelled that way. And the Philippines we're not going to keep. And then Cuba, we don't really take them over, but we do have some say, at least for a while, over what kind of government they're going to have. And this is after the Spanish were kicked out. Effects of the Spanish-American War. I don't expect you to be able to read all this stuff, but one thing I do want to be, it shows some territories we took over that Spain used to control. And I do want to show you this right here. You see where I got the little pointer right there? The Panama Canal Zone. After the Spanish-American War, people realized that we needed a way to get from over here in the Pacific Ocean over to the Atlantic Ocean quickly. And then just as important was to be able to trade with other places using the same canal. So we cut a little notch. It's not a little notch. It's actually a big notch through there. And that's the Panama Canal. We'll talk about that. Cuban independence. Yeah, we don't take over Cuba. And more people start immigrating to the United States. And we are in the Caribbean, which are islands that include Cuba, down off the coast of Florida there and everything. We have we want to keep the foreign countries like Spain and other European countries out of Latin America. That's a concept we've been talking about for a while, since the 1820s. The Monroe Doctrine said they needed to stay away, and now we're backing that up with even more force there. Roosevelt has the phrase, speak softly and carry a big stick. And so that's what that has to do with the idea of if you come over here, we're going to get the big stick out and take care of business with it. And that's kind of what it sounds like is what it means. We want to prevent European intervention in Latin America. And we're using this as like a police power, like a police would use a billy club. That's another way of saying the big stick. Oh, there it is, too. TRS, Theodore Roosevelt. So anyway, just be aware when we talk about that, he's just talking about, I mean, you know what he's talking about, but he's talking about telling European countries, don't come over anymore. You're not allowed to come over here anymore. So anyway. There's what I was talking about a minute ago, the need for a canal. There's the Panama Canal. And of course, this was done at first because they said we needed it because of military security reasons. Let's move my face up there and do that. Some of you probably want my face moved off the thing altogether, but that's okay. And it's really to reduce travel time between, getting places and everything. And that map there shows you used to have to go all the way around South America if you wanted to get to that other, from Atlantic to Pacific. Now you can cut through it and everything, and you can still go through. They've actually redone the Panama Canal recently and made it to where even bigger ships can get through it, and you can actually go through it. It's expensive. My aunt and uncle did it, and it costs a lot of money and everything, but it takes a couple hours to go through and everything, but they did it. Puerto Rico is a place we still have today. It's not a state, but it's a territory we own. We don't need that. Okay, and then one thing I wanted to show you is this little painting here. This shows the United States, and when we were a young country, we were like a little boy. And then in 1803, we're like a little kid. And then by 1819, we're like a young man. And then we start, we start. And you notice that he's getting heavier and heavier. And by the time 1899, which is when this thing is probably, it's when it's painted, rolls around. He has the control of the ships. He has the bigger navy, and now all these other countries want to do business with us and everything. Back then, when somebody was shown as fat, that usually was not talking about his health and his weight as much as talking about he's now rich. That's what when somebody was drawn heavy like that, that means they're wealthy, and it's shown the United States is now a wealthy country there and everything. And again, that's all I really have for this, and this is not meant to be your only swim through on this thing. So anyway, uh, that's the end of that. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me or ask your actual teacher right there. And I hope you have a good rest of the day and week. And I'll let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.